Hello, welcome to Spiritual Slang. We're going to do something a little bit different for this episode because this episode is going to be all about my testimony. So I wanted it to feel like super comfortable. You're in my living room. Welcome to Chateau Chanel. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I just wanted to be comfortable and like personable, and so you can kind of get to know me and like reintroduce myself, because for anyone who doesn't know my story, and even for those that kind of do, I feel like as humans we're constantly evolving. So I wanted to tell my testimony, and I've talked about it a little bit, I think, just like in pieces depending on like an episode's title or what I was talking about. But this is gonna be like from start essentially to where I'm at now, and kind of just to show you how I got here, the tribulations that I faced, the trials that I've gone through, the issues I've gone through, and in hoping that like in true Spiritual Slang fashion that my testimony would be a light to you, to any dark moments, to any dark areas, because it is still, when I talk about my testimony and kind of just like take a look at where I've been and where I'm at now, it is like one of those things that it's like an altar you go back to. It's like a light you revisit, or something that you revisit that brings light into your life. Like, oh, okay, I can keep going. I can keep pursuing. I can keep pushing forward if I was able to get this far. And so let's get into it. Grab something to eat. No, I'm just kidding. Grab something to eat. Okay. So basically growing up, just to give some background, I didn't grow up in the church necessarily. Not even necessarily. I didn't grow up in the church at all. I believed in God. My family believed in God. Like, I knew God as like someone or something that like created everything. That's the most I knew out of it. I knew Jesus, but I didn't really go to church that often. I went like on special holidays, the Christmas, sometimes the Easter for sure. Like, that's like the main one. And then a few like times in between, but I did not grow up like reading the Bible. And there were moments I remember praying, but it was those prayers you do when you like just want something, or you want to be like come out of something hard, or you want to you're scared that you did something bad and you don't want it to be, so you're like, God, I won't ever do it again. So like those are like the encounters I really had with God, but I didn't really know what it meant to be in relationship with God or to know God for real. So I didn't grow up in the church, and I grew up with 3 sisters, so there were 4 girls, and however you think that went is probably exactly how it went. It was pretty crazy, pretty wild. And then I grew up with like my mom primarily, because I didn't have my dad in my life. I did have someone I considered a father figure, which was my stepdad, but I don't think I realized that that was even like a father figure until I think I got older. Just because, I don't know, it was different. I just only knew my mom as like my parent really when I grew up. Like, I just felt like my mom was the parent and that was it, basically. Like, that's who I went to get something from, and that's like where I went to like when I got in trouble and all those things. So that's like kind of how I grew up. I wouldn't say that it was poor, and I wouldn't say that it was rich or middle class. I don't really know what we were. It's like interesting. I mean, there were struggles for sure, but I never felt like I was really missing out on anything, if that makes sense. I think my mom just kind of, for me specifically, like overcompensated in my life. And so I never felt like I missed anything in life, or like I couldn't have something. I didn't have like a big house or anything, but I also didn't grow up in a place where a lot of people did. So I don't think I like knew any lack essentially. But it's funny because like when I talk to my sisters about it, especially my older sister, she says it was like hidden from me. And I was, you could say, like a good kid in the eyes of my mom and my sisters. But then I had like the secret life in high school and growing up, where I was doing a lot of really wild things and trying a lot of different things. But I don't think like anyone really knew, other than like my friends and stuff, of course, but like my family and stuff didn't know, because I never really let it affect me in terms of like school wise or anything like that. So you didn't really notice that I was doing these like crazy things, like going to raves and doing things that raves entail, like drugs and stuff. And so, but then that never like affected my schoolwork or anything. So I was like a really good student, always getting good grades, never really missing school or anything like that. I just had this like side life going on where I was very adventurous and exploring a bunch of different things. And I think like when I look back in those times, that's like, in the moment, I didn't really know the protection, but I felt like God was protecting me in those moments because I was really in some wild situations. I feel like when you're that age, you're not really worried about life. You're more so just like doing and trying whatever and not thinking about the consequences that come with it. I feel like now I'd be like in my head having anxiety, all sorts of things, like if something might happen. But like when you're that age, teenager, you're like more careless with things. And so when I think about those times and I think about like what those consisted of, I'm always like, dang, God was like even protecting me back then, even though I didn't really know him, like he was still with me. And then college happened and I would say I was still exploring like when I was like 19, 20, 21 with the wildlife and doing different things and trying different drugs again and different ones, and then drinking and smoking and all sorts of things. But again, it wasn't like affecting like my schoolwork or anything like that. So it wasn't like I felt like I was like lost in something, but it just felt like I was living like a double life essentially. And that doesn't mean that all of it ever made me feel good, because it really didn't. I think I never really felt like that was my life. Even though I was doing stuff like that, I never felt like I fit into that. I always just felt like an outsider, even with like the people that were doing it too. I felt like I was the one, I don't know, I was always in my head like, this doesn't even feel like me, but I'm not gonna like stop doing it. Like I was still doing it because that's who my friends were, you know? I was kind of like just doing whatever my friends were doing, and they weren't peer pressuring me or anything, but I feel like if I was around a different group, I would have adapted to that group too. Like I was kind of like one of those people that just like went from group to group, or like whoever my environment was, I kind of became that in a sense. So yeah, I was doing those things. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I ended up moving to San Francisco for school. And I think that's when I really started to like really find myself, but not like the self that I know now, like another version of myself. I feel like we have so many versions of ourselves in our lives. But that's like when I really started to become, I feel like, more independent, because I wasn't in like the constraints of like the friends that I've always had all my life. I was like kind of finding like my own voice and the things that I liked and who I was. I moved to San Francisco, did that. I stopped the drugs, but I was still drinking and partying, and getting involved with different people, and like just living this like really like feminist, like I can do whatever I want, whoever I want, whenever I want, like that type of lifestyle. So I kind of like went into that. Actually, that was still happening before I went to San Francisco, but I was still doing that when I went to San Francisco. I just wasn't doing like the drugs or anything. I mean, there were a couple of times where I dabbled in it, but it wasn't like before I went there. And I think that's just testament to your environment, because the people I was hanging out with in San Francisco weren't necessarily doing those, but they were partying and stuff. And so was I. And I was also in college, so you can take that for what that is. So yeah, I went to college in San Francisco, and I would consider it like one of the best decisions I've made, just because of who I met, who I became, and how I started to see myself in those times. And yes, then I studied broadcasting, which is so interesting how God works, because as I continue like with my testimony, you'll learn I didn't really go into broadcasting as a career, but now I'm like holding a mic right now. Like that's how God works. Like he makes everything like work together, but in his way, in his form. So back to the story. I studied broadcasting because I thought I was going to be like on E! News and entertainment reporter, because I really loved entertainment news. And I was so interested just with that life and what that was going on. And I also liked, like when I watched them on TV, like I liked the personas that like the women portrayed, like these independent, like sophisticated, strong women that were just like reporting. They were super beautiful, cute, all those things. And so I was like, I want to do that. And I like thought I wanted to do that, even though I wasn't a speaker. Like I was like, I'm so shy. I don't even know how I'm gonna get in front of a camera and report entertainment news, but I just liked what that looked like. So that's what I studied. in college, and that's what I graduated with, broadcasting electronic communication arts to be exact, from San Francisco State. But then I got like an internship, actually like my last year of college, and I got an internship at a radio station because I had read that a lot of people in entertainment news had done radio first. And so then I was like, okay, maybe I can take that route. So I got an internship at a radio station, which was super fun. You got to go to concerts and do like different events, and it was fun. And then when I graduated college, I got a job there. But then as I continued to work there, I realized that there wasn't like much growth in that industry. Like people stay in that industry for years and don't really go that far. And I was just someone that like just always wanted to elevate, which probably had to do with like my chase for perfection and happiness and all sorts of things. So I was always someone that wanted to elevate, and I would never be, I know myself, and I even know myself now, like I would never be happy feeling like I wasn't growing or prospering. And so I kind of realized, so after I graduated, this was like a year after, and I started to feel like, I don't know if I really want to stay in the radio business. But then this is where it gets interesting. Well, I guess the whole thing's interesting. But this is where it really gets interesting, because this is like my first inkling of like God was kind of communicating with me, even though I didn't really know that much about him yet. So I remember was it a year? No, it was about like 6 months after I graduated. I think so, yeah. So 6 months after I graduated, I remember my stepdad, who I had mentioned was like the father figure, but I didn't really identify him as my father figure. He was just in my life for a while. But at the end of that year, he ended up passing away. And I remember, and it was on December 31st. So it was on New Year's Eve, and I was in San Francisco. He was in LA, and he ended up passing away. And I remember the next day I woke up on January 1st. I'm pretty certain it was January 1st. If not, it must have been January 2nd or 3rd. But I remember it was like within I don't want to misquote, but I remember it was within the few like days of the new year, the next year. And I had this like inkling, which now I know as the Holy Spirit, but at the time I didn't know what that was. But I had this inkling like I was going to watch the church I go to now, which is One LA, every Sunday online, because I was living in San Francisco, so obviously I couldn't go in person. But I had this like inkling that I wanted to watch it every Sunday. And I had known about One LA because I would come back home and visit my family, and my sister used to go to that church. So that's how like I had known about the church. And it was the first time that I ever like really like saw a church and was like, oh, this is the real deal. I don't know, something just feels different. So when my stepdad died, it was like the inkling and the turning point for me to like, I just felt like I wanted to watch church. And it was probably because in that time I was hurting. And so in those moments where you're so low, you like, those are the moments when God gets you the best. Like those are the moments where you turn to God, is like when you have nothing else almost is what you feel like, or you're like just hurting so bad. You need kind of like, there's like an analogy I'm looking for, but I can't think of it right now, but you need like, I don't know, like a little push or something. And so I was like, I'm going to watch church every Sunday online, or if I don't like make it that Sunday because I'm doing something, then I'll watch it that week. And I'm pretty certain that I watched every sermon that year, if not on that day, like a day later or like sometime after, but I definitely watched every sermon, and every sermon spoke to where my life was that entire year. I thought I was tripping. No, but every sermon spoke to where my life was that entire year. And then, so in the beginning of that year, I started to think like, at the end of this year, I'm going to move back to LA. And I didn't think I really knew why. I just knew that I needed to come back here. And that's when, so I thought I knew that. And I started telling people that. I was like, I'm moving back to LA at the end of the year. And I was like, okay, so I still have time to plan, figure out what I'm going to do, like where I'm going to live, like work, all those things. And then I end up getting in a relationship, and they knew that I was going to move, because I had said that to them too. I was telling anyone that would listen. But so yeah, they knew I was going to move. And as it got closer to the move date, that person had also said that they would move too, but like a few months after me. And so then I was like, cool. And as it got closer to the move date, like closer to the end of the year, I started to like have doubts, or more so I wasn't prepared to move. Like I had done no planning, like what I was going to do with my life, where I was going to work. I was going to leave my job. At the time I was actually working 2 jobs in San Francisco. Let that be known. I was working 2 jobs. I was a hustler. I was kidding. No, but I was working 2 jobs. But I was going to leave my jobs, everything, but I didn't know what I was going to do out here. So I started to like kind of, I wouldn't say panic, but more so think in my head, like, oh, I won't move at the end of the year in December like I had originally planned. I'll just move like around the time that my boyfriend moves at the time. So, but I wasn't telling anyone that. Like that's like what was going on in my head. And I kid you not, from the moment I started to think that, God, I didn't know it was God at the time, but now I do, shook everything he could up to get me to leave that city. So he shook my job up, one of my jobs. He ended up moving it. And I didn't have a car in San Francisco because you don't really drive in the city. So he ended up moving my job outside of San Francisco, like in another part of the Bay Area. So then I would now need to take like this long train. So that became really annoying. And then he ended up shaking my relationship up. And then he ended up shaking like just my feelings about everything that I was doing out there. Like everything felt like I felt stuck all of a sudden in general. And once he shook my relationship up, because I think that was like the one thing that I was like afraid to leave in a sense. And once he shook that up, like we ended up breaking up. And the way we were set up as like a couple, that wasn't like the first time we ended things. So we would like break up, get back together, break up, get back together, like that toxicity. And there was a moment where I was going to go over to his house to get back together with him. And I just knew like if we had a conversation, we'd probably like end up working out. And I was there for like 15 minutes or something, or 20 minutes. I don't know the exact time, but I know it was less than 30 minutes and less than an hour when he got a call from his brother's girlfriend, who they lived in LA at the time. Ironic that his brother heart was having issues, so that he had to be rushed to the hospital. And he literally left San Francisco at 1 a.m. that night and was gone for 2 weeks. I woke up 2 days later and tears in my eyes, called my mom, and I was like, I'm coming to LA in 2 weeks. And she was like, oh no, I'm like, maybe you think about it, maybe you're like being a little dramatic. And I was like, no, I literally need to leave. I like can't even fathom staying here for those 2 weeks. Like I need to leave now. And so I ended up like quitting my jobs, like getting out of my lease wherever I was, didn't get like a deposit back or anything, like got rid of whatever I had. And I needed a ride to get back to LA too, because I didn't have a car or anything, and I didn't buy a ticket, and everything was so rushed. I just like felt like suffocated, like I need to leave now. And so I like my friend's friend was coming back to LA to visit, because it was like around holiday season, because it was in December. I literally moved back 2 days before Christmas or something. Was driving back to LA. So I caught a ride with him with like 2 freaking suitcases. And I was back in LA. And it was so crazy though, because before I got here, I mean, the day before, I think the 2 days before I was going to leave to LA for good, my ex had came to my job and was talking to me and was like asking me something that was kind of initiating like we could like work out together or something after. And I was like, oh no, I'm moving in like 2 days. And I had told him that, but I don't think he thought I was serious, but I was serious as a heart attack, as they say. And so like, but it's so crazy because when I think about it, like in that form, he came back and I saw him like one more time before, like at a time when I couldn't go back on my decision to leave, like where it couldn't affect me to leave back to LA, because I already told my jobs, I already like told my landlord and everything. So I had to go now. And so yeah, I left in 2 days. I came back to LA. I moved back in with my family. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. And I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I just know it was like the right decision. I never actually regretted moving either. I never felt like, should I have stayed? I felt so much peace. And that's how you know it was the right decision, because like God is not the God of confusion. And even though I wasn't like fully in relationship with God at the time, he was guiding me in that time and like showing me what to do, showing me how to move. And I just kept like feeling it, like hearing it, but not really knowing what it was. It was just like my gut feeling, but that gut feeling was the Holy Spirit, because that's really what it is. So here I am in LA. I decided to start going to one LA church, not putting the whole name in there. I decided to start going in person consistently every Sunday. I ended up going every Sunday. I actually got a job at one of my old jobs before I moved to San Francisco, which was like a receptionist job, because I was like, I just need to make some money. Like I need to get a car eventually. I'm living in LA. There's no way I cannot have a car out here. Like it's not the same. But honestly, even though like I'm like kind of like smiling in this area and laughing a little bit, it was so hard on my identity that time. It was such a struggle. I felt like lost. Like, I wouldn't say like I didn't feel like myself, because in that moment, I didn't know who I was. Like I was living this life in San Francisco that I had built, and was so happy at one point, and had great friends and cool jobs and like a boyfriend and all these things. And then all of a sudden I'm like in my mom's house, in my old bedroom, or a bedroom. I don't remember if it was my old one. I can't remember, but we don't need that detail. But I was in my mom's house, no car, no job really, and like trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do. And so even though I'm like making light of it, it was super hard on my mental. And I was literally, and I'm not even joking, crying at my job that I had sometimes, because I would work like evening shifts. I was like, and you're a receptionist, so I was like kind of like folding towels and like putting them away. And I remember crying in the hallways there, because I remember feeling like so like unhappy and lost. And I just didn't want to be at like my old job. Like no one wants to go to an old job that you had before. You feel like you're almost taking a step backwards in life, which is like super uncomfortable. Then I ended up thinking like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Like I need like an actual career job. And being the person that I am, like that always strive for like the next big thing kind of, but also just success, even to a fault sometimes. I was like, I need to be a career woman. That's like what I always wanted to be. Not so much now. No, I'm just kidding. But I always like wanted to have like that success. So I was like, what do I like? I like to watch YouTube videos of beauty. So let me just like look into the beauty industry. And I ended up finding an internship that didn't pay me other than like a stipend, which is like a certain amount of money that's not enough to like live off of, just so that you could have something, right? And so since they didn't really pay me that much, like I had 2 jobs now in LA with no car, and was working both of the jobs sometimes on the same day. And it was so wild to me, like, but I just like was like, if I just climb up the ranks at this place, like I'm their first employee, let me just like learn all I can learn. So I missed the part that I found an internship in marketing in the beauty industry. And so I was like, I didn't study marketing, so like I do need to learn, so like let me just do this and be an intern, and let me just have 2 jobs for a little bit. And so the internship technically was like, I think like 3 months or something, and then we were going to revisit and see like if I could get hired. So I ended up having those 2 jobs, and I was working both of them at the same time, sometimes like the same day. And so this is literally what I would do. I would go to work. I forgot how I got there. I don't think it was the bus, because I think I was scared of the bus. No, I'm scared. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it wasn't the bus. Either like a family member dropped me off, or I took Ubers. So I would go to work in the morning at the internship, and then I would take an Uber to my second job. My job first, like the internship was in West Hollywood, and my second job was in Sherman Oaks. So I found actually creative ways to actually take an Uber, because there is a lot of car apps that you can use that are way cheaper than Uber, where sometimes it was just like random people, like if you were going on the same route as them. I forgot what app that was, but they would pick you up if they were going to work too. I was like on stuff like that just because it was cheaper and it was easier than like taking like public transportation. And And yeah, so I was doing stuff like that. And so then I was like crying at my nighttime job because I was so over it. And I was like, I don't know what this life is. And it's not like what it's supposed to look like. And then I would get like picked up by like my mom or something after, like my sister. And then I would do it all over again. And so I was really, really busting my butt to like try to like climb up the ranks. But at the same time, I was still going to church every Sunday. I was like building my faith as well. And so there was like so many changes. That was such a, like, when I look back at it, it was such a transitional season of my life where nothing felt really stable other than maybe like my relationship with God, like growing in a relationship with God. I knew that was going to stay, but I knew like the receptionist job was going to eventually go. Like I knew that I was going to grow in the ranks at my like beauty job. I just knew it was going to work for me. I'm not even joking. Like I think that's probably what kept me going, because I just knew who I was and I was like, I'm going to freaking get this job. Like I'm going to do it. And so then so I'm growing in my relationship with God. And in this time, I ended up losing a really close friend of mine because I was growing in my relationship with God, which meant that I had to start saying no to things that I used to do and yes to God. So that was the beginning of saying yes to God. Actually, the beginning was when I said yes to moving out here, but I know it was God at the time. I thought it was just my own like thought. And then God was like, you need to start letting things go, saying no to things in order to like say yes to me. And so I started saying no to really going out as often and partying. I started saying no to doing certain type of things. And when I started doing that, a really close friend of mine of like 12 years, who was like my best friend, ended up not liking that I was saying no, basically. And our relationship got really shaky, where at one point I just had to like lay it down and it was done. And then that was it. And the crazy thing is that I thought it was going to be kind of a battle to lay it down, in the sense that she was going to be kind of reactive and she was going to take it easy. And she didn't really, but there was a time where we got in a really bad argument where we almost like fought. Like she wanted to fight me, and like that's how bad it got. That then it didn't end up happening because one of our mutual friends like broke it up. But the next day, she had contacted me about wanting to talk about it. And I was like, okay, I'll go after work, or I'll go to your house after work. And I ended up never going for some reason, the Holy Spirit. I ended up never going. And I thought like she would probably contact me about it or call me the next day about it. And she never did. Like God gave that, like God covered that relationship in the sense that like he covered like the breaking up of it. And sometimes we're afraid to do something because we feel like, oh, we don't know how they're going to take it, or we don't know like how it's going to go. But he already figured out a way where it would work if you just said yes to him. If you just said yes to laying down a relationship, like he would make them not want to call you, you know, like that's how it would go. And so yeah, I ended up laying down that relationship, and then the time came to revisit my job or my internship, and I am getting a job. I ended up getting the job, and I was able to quit my part-time job. Amen. Glory to God. And then, so I ended up climbing the ranks at that beauty job, getting a job, and then getting promoted, I feel like twice in 1 year, and which was really, it was really crazy. And that just like goes to show, like, once you put in the work, like if you show your commitment, God will make it work, you know, like God will do it. And God, of course, is going to sometimes like test you, or like, it's not going to be easy in the beginning. Like it's going to test like, your patience and like your commitment and whether or not you like really want something. But it ended up working out. And then the walk really began with the Lord. Just kidding. But like, then I got baptized. And I got baptized not for the first time, but the first time my own decision, because I got baptized when I was like a kid. And it was, I think, like the thing that really, really like solidified my relationship with God. I got baptized like 1.5 years after I had started going to one in person frequently, like going to church consistently in person, like 1.5 years after. And I got baptized, and it was one of the best decisions I could have made. And I just felt like the weight of the world lift off of me when I was like dipped in the water and brought back up. It was like almost like solidifying, like I said, solidifying my relationship with God, and that I was really in it for the long haul, like that I was really going to live this life for God. And then I got also more involved in church previous to getting baptized, but I got more involved in church. I ended up like serving on the marketing ministry. I ended up going into a small group, and through the small group is where I actually met a lot of my best friends that I have now. And that only happened after I gave up the last friend. And so a lot of times God has like things waiting for us, but until we let go of the old, we won't lay hold of the new. And that was like one prime example of that, because that was like a few years ago, and I still have those friends as my best friends to this day. And it's like, and they also like helped me become who I am, you know, because they saw me for who I was, and they saw what God saw in me. And like when you get really good community around you, it's not only great to like have people to go to, but it makes you a better person. So that all happened in the time that I also got baptized, which is amazing. So life was looking up. I had a great job. I was prospering there. Like I said, the promotions. And then fast forward to 2018. That's also the year I got baptized. So 2018. So when you're like in I think actually just in life, I was going to say in Christian groups, but I think just in life, you're always like wondering, and people talk about their purpose and their passion. I was the type of person that was like, what is my purpose or passion? Like, I don't really know what I am purposed to do on this earth. And I don't really know like what my passion is. There's things that I liked, but I didn't think there were things that I was like passionate about. Like you see photographers and stuff, like I didn't have that. Like there were a lot of things I liked, but it was nothing that I was like, this is what I was made to do. And so I always felt like kind of like lost in that area and not really knowing what I was supposed to do. And I was like, I don't think I'm meant to like just do marketing. I don't think that's my purpose. Like I like it, but it's not, I was like, it didn't resonate with that being my purpose, basically. And so that was like also the year that I was like trying to really praying to God and having my small group pray for me, and was like, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? And I remember he revealed to me what my purpose was in 2018, and he had shown me spiritual slang as a way I was going to execute it. Not that spiritual slang is my purpose, because it's just an outlet of how my purpose comes into fruition, because the purpose isn't like a one-stop thing. It's like an everlasting thing, and you just like you disperse it in different outlets. And so spiritual slang dropped on my spirit in 2018. And when God told me that, I was like, yeah, right. Because even though I was like in a small group, I was not like open to like really telling my story and like telling people about my life, because I still had shame about it. Like I was still holding on to so much shame about growing up without a dad. Like it was kind of embarrassing when a lot of people did have their dad, or I had like dark thoughts that I was still thinking, or insecurities that like I didn't want to talk about, because I had like put on this perfect persona my entire life. And even like when I was talking about in high school, when I was like doing crazy things, but like no one really knew, because I had this perfect persona of myself that my family and friends and my family and like my mom was seeing and stuff. But like I also had this like other side. And so I was so used to putting on this persona of myself that wasn't actually real. And so when God told me about the podcast and like what it was going to consist of, I was like, no way. Like I'm not going to tell everyone my life. And so even though he told me that, it also wasn't time, and he said that wasn't time, it was like, okay, but it's not like you're gonna do it now anyway. And so I was like, okay, great. So I kind of like made me feel better, because I knew that my purpose was to kind of help people that looked like me, not on the outside but on the inside. And I knew that there was like something coming up, which was exciting, but also I was like, I don't know, whatever. But I felt like more settled. Okay, then fast forward. Still at my job, still growing in my relationship with God. And throughout these times too, I do want to mention, like, it wasn't like all flowers and butterflies. Like when you start walking with God for real, like there's a lot of things being dug up. There's a lot of things being brought to your attention of how you are that are super uncomfortable to face and kind of embarrassing to face, like that you would even have those type of thoughts in your head, and God point them out and be like, you need to work on that. And so there was a lot of self-work going on. So it was like hard at moments, but there was like so much other like joyful things that kind of like overshadowed it. But then 2020 hit. Of course, everyone knows, y'all heard about COVID. It was this like thing that like happened, but 2020 hits, and my world got shaken again, and God required another yes from me, and that was to start spiritual slang in 2020. And that year, God unraveled so much in me in order to build me up. Like, I was on my living room floor multiple times crying my eyes out. And I don't even know how to explain it other than almost like a I don't even know, like a, it's a purging basically. Like it's like a pressing, it's a constantly being pressured, like not pressured, but like pushed and pushed and pushed to like become, and like kind of like, I'm trying to like really explain it, but to like really let things go so that you can become, basically like being broken down to be built up. And he was doing that because he was breaking so many things off of me that I wasn't. So when he revealed this to me, I was like, oh, I'm not going to speak about all those things. And so in 2020, when it was going to be the year that I did it, he was like, oh, yes, you are. And so now I have to make you believe that you can actually speak, make you comfortable with actually speaking about who you are and like what you've gone through. In order for him to do that, he had to break down all the walls that I had and all like the personas that I built up and like the perfectionist and stuff in order to be able to get vulnerable enough to get on a mic and talk about it. So that was really painful, but I was like, I have to, like, there was no way I wasn't going to do spiritual slang. Like nothing had felt in my spirit so real in my life other than God telling me that in that moment. So all 2020 was really hard. I was like off of social media the entire year. I wasn't the entire year, but most of the year I was, because there was so many fasts going on with my church as well. And there was so many just like getting my mind right, getting my spirit right, getting everything right in order for me to do spiritual slang. And I remember when I had launched it, I was like in tears because I was like, God really does it. Like there is no way the Chanel from 2010 could have done this. Like it's so wild to me, because if anyone knows me from back then, you know, you probably never knew anything about me. Like, and even when I launched this, there were so many people that I knew that were like, I had no idea, like that's how you thought. I had no idea you went through that. And that's because I never spoke about that. Like I had this like perfect, joyful persona, and I was happy in moments, and I was, you know, like perfect. No, I'm just kidding. And I was like joyful in moments. There was a lot of like hiding that I was doing. And there was a lot of things that were just pushed so deep that you almost don't think they affect you, because they're like in your toes, but like they're actually affecting the way you navigate life and the way you think about things and the way you do things and the reason why you do certain things. And so yeah, that was 2020. And then 2021 happened, and God required another yes once again. And this yes was extremely hard because I had identified myself as this, and I was still in a phase of like kind of getting to know myself as this new version of me, while I was still kind of like, when you kind of change your lifestyle from not walking with God to walking with God, sometimes the old life you kind of miss it. In a sense, like you almost feel like a tug towards there, and you also kind of like see what you can get away with from the old life still while living your new life. And I've had moments like that when I was walking with God, especially in that time where there were things I gave up for sure that I would never do again. Like I would never do drugs. Like that was like my thing, and it was my conviction. But there was still ways of thinking. There were still people I was entertaining, like things like that, where I was like, I would do this in my old life, but like, can I still get away with it now, even if I'm not going all the way with a person? Like, even if I wasn't, I'll just say like having sex with a person, but like still entertaining not the thought of sex, but like still entertaining them as a person, like things like that, where you kind of just like don't really know who you are, because you're like kind of being pulled in one direction and pulled in another and keep getting pulled like that. But like, you know, you want the new life, but like the old life is still kind of tempting. I hope that makes sense. But that's just like how it is. It's a constant tug of war when God is pulling you to like the better, you know? So yeah, 2021 came, and I had identified myself, because I didn't know myself for a while. Like I found identity in my job. So this was the job that was the internship. Then I got a job there. And at this point I had been there for 4 years. 4 years. And they were like family to me. Like they were like my brother and sister. I was their first employee. I helped them like build the team and grow it. And it was like my identity. Everybody knew me as Chanel, the beauty marketer from there. Like I was like confident in saying where I worked, and I was like happy there kind of, well, I started getting unhappy, because once you know it's time to leave, like your entire like thought about a perspective about somewhere doesn't feel as good because the grace has left. So God's grace was done there. And so it was time for me. God had put on my spirit to leave. I battled with that thing, I think, for like 8 months. I'm pretty sure I sat on that thing for 8 months. No, maybe 8 months, maybe 6, maybe 5, something around there. It was somewhere around there. But I battled with it for so long because I was like, I don't know, like, what am I going to do? Like, I have bills now. I forgot to mention in the testimony, but I had gotten a car eventually, and then I had gotten a place, my own place. So in 2021, when God was like, you need to leave your job, I was battling with that for months because I was like, how am I going to leave like, that's my main source of income. That's how I pay my bills. I don't want to go take a step back. I'm not going to like leave my apartment. I'm not going to lose my car like that. I'm like, God, like, what? How? Like, I'm not going to, what? And so I battled with it for months. But the more I battled with it, the more I wasn't feeling any more peace. Like, I felt like I was constant, like I just didn't have peace in life because I was battling for so long with that. And I knew what I needed to do. I just wasn't doing it, basically. And I remember what really did it was that I think I mentioned this before, but I was like, what is the alternative? I asked myself that question, like, what's the alternative? You stay there and you're unhappy because you always wonder, like, what if I would have gone? Was I supposed to go? And I was like, I just can't live like that. I can't live with the thought that, like, what ifs, you know? And I knew if I stayed, I would just be unhappy because the entire time I would be thinking about the fact that God told me to leave. So I ended up leaving. And I ended up giving them like 3 months. And in those 3 months, I kind of just like helped them replace me and everything. And I remember when I told them that I was leaving, I was on my living room floor and I was crying so hard because, and this is exactly how I've explained it before, which is it felt like I was losing an identity. But in that moment, I was like, if I had not been walking with God, I probably wouldn't have had to do this because I wouldn't be feeling like that conviction or that inkling, and I would have just stayed. But in that moment, I was like thinking that, and I was also thinking, but I wouldn't change it for the world because of what I know God has done for my life. And I know like God will come through, and I just know that like the walk with God has always been, it's like way more important than me being at a job. And so I was like crying because I was losing an identity, but I felt so much peace at the same time about my decision. I never regretted it. And even though I stayed there for 3 more months to like help them and stuff, I like never felt like, should I stay longer? Should I like, no, I was like 3 months is cap and that's it. And so I left after 3 months, and I was filled with joy. Like I was so peaceful. I had so much peace and joy in my life, like that I didn't realize I had lost because I had stayed somewhere longer than I should have stayed. So then I ended up being unemployed, but God is good, and he was still providing in that time. And I never felt like I lacked in that time either. Like I was going to coffee shops, paying for coffee. I don't know if I should have been doing that, but like, but it worked out. But like, I felt like still, like God was just still providing. And another thing he did say and made me realize was like, my paycheck didn't come, like it came from my job, but by way of God, you know, like God is our provider at the end of the day. And so like God could provide for me in any way. It doesn't have to be through that job. And I remember before I laid down that job, actually, I remember I was running because I would always run, and like God would talk to me while I was running. And I remember literally having this conversation. I remember exactly what street it was. It was like over there. And I remember thinking, but how, God? And then he said, and I remember it so clearly. And he was like, it wouldn't be faith if I told you how. And like, if I showed you, then what would that do? In order for you to have faith, you need to do it, and then I'll show you. And I was like, dang, okay, fine. So fast forward, I was unemployed for a couple months. Didn't really know what I was going to do. I never thought I would go back to like full-time work because I was like, I don't really know if that's for me. And then I ended up getting a call from a job that wanted to hire me, or that wanted to interview me. And I was like, oh, I'll interview there, but I don't really know. And then I ended up going to interview. They liked me, so they wanted to do a second interview. I was like, okay, I'll go. Like, I don't know if I really get it. Like, it was a pretty big company, or is. And then I ended up getting the job, and I was like, God, is this you or the devil? And because it was like the deal was sweet type of thing. Like it was like something that, had I not left my job previously, that I probably would have jumped at, that I probably would have like given something for, like to be able to have that job, because it meant like all the requirements I wanted from like the very get-go of being like the successful like career woman, all those things. But like your desires change as you walk with God, and God gives you new desires and godly desires. And so although like that's like an expression of me that I do really like, it wasn't my everything anymore. So I didn't really care to go back to work, like I said. But then after praying through it, talking through some wise confidants, but like talking to with my community, like praying for it. I hit all the prayer points. I prayed in here. I prayed at my lookout spot. I prayed in the car. Like you have to go through all the spots. I ended up getting the job, and it has been greater than I could have asked for. And I think that's because I don't feel identity in it. I feel like it's what I do. It's one of the things I do, but it's not my identity. And so I don't feel like if I'm so afraid to lose it, or I'm so afraid to like not be someone or be whatever. And so now it's just like almost like a perk, and it's like almost like a perk to have it. And so I say that because, as I mentioned, like I wouldn't be in this mindset had I not left my old job, had I not really found my identity in God, and knowing that like God could call me anywhere at any moment, and that would be like my old assignment would be up. Everything's an assignment when you walk with God, like everything's assignment. And so God could call me out of anywhere at any moment, and I would go. And so, but that also gives me the leisure to not feel controlled by anything, to not feel like this will always be my life, this will always be how it is, because it's not, like we're constantly growing, and new things come, new blessings come. And that's the amazing thing about it. So that's where we're at now. We are here in my living room on this day, which I don't know what day it is, but I just wanted to like kind of retell my testimony like fully. And I kind of did like a synopsis because we'd be here all night, but like tell my testimony, because through all those times, there was a lot of great moments and a lot of joyous things and a lot of godly things, and God really showed his face in every part of my life, even before I was like walking with God. But there were a lot of dark moments as well. Like there were so many dark moments within that, of just like facing like imposter syndrome at the new job, because feeling like you're not worthy enough for it, but still being able to prosper at it. Like how is that? Like how, like that just like proves that the enemy is like a liar, because it's like I can have thoughts sometimes where it's like you're not enough, or you're not creative enough, or you're not smart enough, or you're not deserving to be in this room, and then like get praise later, and it's like something's not adding up, and that's because the enemy is a liar, so don't believe him. But yeah, so like even though like there's so many great moments, there's still like a lot of dark moments, and a lot of moments where I'm questioning myself and questioning if I'm making the right decision, or if I did the right thing, or if I'm at the right place. But like as I look back over it, God really just shows that he makes it all work together. Like even if you don't feel like you made the right decision, like he'll reroute you, or he'll make it known, or he'll make it work for your good. Like you don't have to be worried about like misstepping or anything like that. And that's something that I had to realize with this job for sure, because I was like, what if I end up making like the wrong choice? And I remember my friend told me, she was like, even if you do give yourself grace that you did, and you're never too far out of God's reach. And so like, even if you did, like he would bring you back, like you're not going to be far out of his reach. And so that like gave me so much peace. And so I just hope that this whole testimony like is light to know that like you can get through one, losing friends, like getting over like your identity, like not losing a job, but having to leave something that you felt was like your identity, even if it's like mine was a job, but like it could be relationships, it could be like people, it could be laying down certain parts of you or whatever. And so that you can get through all of that and still like prosper and still see so much glory and blessings come your way. But I also hope that like it just shows that like everything really does work together, because as I mentioned, like I studied broadcasting, and then here I am with the mic, even though like I gave up the idea of doing anything with a mic. Like God brought me back to it. Like he does it in his own way, in his own timing, and for his kingdom. And so, yeah, I just hope that it's light, that like you can get through it. And if you've ever listened to like any other episodes, you like will hear more about my mind in general, like how my, like all like the issues that I faced, because I've talked about insecurities and like daddy issues and things like that. But like to think that all those were going on while all these great things were happening in my life and all these things were leading up to where I'm at now, it's like, dang, like you can really get through, like even in dark moments, like keep pushing forward because there's light coming, you know? And so it's like, I didn't let anything stop me from just keep going. And there were so many times where I just wanted to stop and give up, but like I just kept pushing forward, and I kept like doing the internship and taking the Ubers or share rides. I mean, I met some cool people. I won't remember this one specifically, but anyways, but like kept doing that. And even though I was like crying at my job and stuff, I was like, there has to be better. There has to be more on the other side. And if you just like keep pursuing and keep pushing forward, like it'll come to pass what you're waiting for. And so, yeah, thank you for listening to this very casual episode of Spiritual Slang. Stay prayed up. And yeah, have an amazing, amazing day. I'm done. Bye.